Reboots, sequels, prequels, and reimaginations have been all the rage of late, and there's plenty of reasons for the trend, most notably the power of nostalgia. Cobra Kai arrived in 2018 and seemingly out of thin air. As far as I can tell, there wasn't a widespread call for the Karate Kid storyline to continue, especially from a different perspective than the original series of movies from the 1980s. Nostalgia for Daniel LaRusso's saga certainly wasn't a noticeable component of pop culture through the early 2010s. Adam Galloway, the host of the Raised on Film podcast, a program on which I had the pleasure of being a guest to discuss another martial arts production, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, joined me to take a closer look at Cobra Kai and decide how the TV series acts as a reflection of the time period in which it was made.
Primary Source podcast. I'm Eric Paul, and today I am here with Adam, who is the host of the Raised on Film podcast. That's how we cross paths, I think, is because I put some feelers out there in one of the several podcast find a guest websites on Facebook, and I said I do pop culture stuff, and then I saw you put one up saying you do pop culture stuff, and so as two pop culturists, it's a good match. So I love
match made in heaven.
I really love the title of your show, because I think a lot of us, and if you're tuning into this show, you're probably the same way. We were raised on TV and movies, right? What was your idea behind the show?
Yeah. So I'll go as quickly as I can here. So actually, at the very beginning of the pandemic, me and three buddies all started a podcast, The Viewer's Cut, and it was just a way of talking about all the same nonsense we talk about when we're together, but virtually while we were all in lockdown. Going, we did a couple seasons, and then I really enjoyed it. And after that came to an end, I just decided to keep the same setup and do my own thing, and each different guests. That I went to film school twice, and I got a bunch of different filmies, or cinephiles, whatever you want to call us. And we just talk about a whole spectrum of TV, movies, actors, filmmakers, the whole shebang.
That's, to me, one of the best kinds of podcasts to listen to, is just the behind the scenes kind of thing, or what, different kinds of media means to the consumer of it, those of us watching, because we've all been very fortunate in the last, I'd say, 20, 30 years of between VHS and DVD, especially DVD, with all like the director's cut and commentary and, all the inside stuff. We can, not only can we watch and rewatch movies, but we can always get like so many stories that you wouldn't otherwise get. And it gives a deeper meaning to so many shows and movies and such. And I'm also hearing from you, I think a lot of people, we know in real time that COVID was, a world-changing event. It changed a lot of people's attitudes about what they wanted to do, and it gave us opportunities to explore, new mediums like podcasting. And so, 30, 40 years from now, people are going to look back and be like, yeah, the early 2020s were a huge shakeup in the way that people saw, the world. But we're going to talk today about Cobra Kai, a TV series that acts as a sequel to the Karate Kid movie, at least the original Karate Kid movies from the 1980s. And that's one of several shows that we could have all binged watched during various lockdowns and quarantines, right? Because it came out just before, about 2 years before, in 2018. What is it about Cobra Kai that appeals to you?
Well, that's tough to answer. I have some nostalgia for the Karate Kid, not a lot, but I'm a big nostalgia freak, and I love when things get tackled light. And if you know anything about the Karate Kid, it was a very stereotypical black and white, good guy, bad guy, good guy wins in the end, beating all the obstacles. I mean, it's the same director as Rocky, so it follows a lot of the same formula as Rocky. And when I heard about the show, it originally went to YouTube Premium or YouTube Red, I forget the name of it, before it came to Netflix. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be a disaster. Right. That's going to be terrible. Like, what's Johnny Lawrence up to these days? Like, it sounded like such a bad idea. Like, why do we have to revisit these characters? But then I'm like, well, Creed shouldn't have worked either. And it was great. Right. So, maybe it'll work. Maybe they can do something different with it. And that's exactly what they did. And Johnny Lawrence was the main focus of it. Mm-hmm. And we got to see life after the events of all the Karate Kid, the original movies in the 80s, like you said. And they just had fun with it. They know exactly what they're doing with the show. They know it's ridiculous, especially now by the 4th and 5th season. Mm-hmm. But it's fun because the characters are engaging. There's rivalries. There's a lot of that teen angst stuff that can get a little tiresome, but the main draw to it is Johnny and Daniel, because the roles are flipped and you realize that Daniel's flawed as well as Johnny, and Johnny's good. He's a decent person. He's not the quote unquote villain. So it was just interesting in the first episode, and then you got the music playing. It's got all the nostalgia feels to it. So that's what drew me in. And then it once Netflix picked it up, it just got even bigger. I've
been meaning to go deeper into the show. I like a lot of people. I have like a lineup of shows. People are like, you got to watch this. You got to watch this. And Cobra Kai is up there. I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, just because I have so many other things that I'm like, but I know a lot of it. And from what I do on this program, it's almost like I know what I need to know, and I can already see right now why it's a great document of the time that it came out. It's going to act so well. And, right now I can tell exactly, like you said with Creed, that shouldn't have worked. Like, there shouldn't have been a reason why Creed would do well. But like, as soon as that movie came out, and then especially Creed 2, I'm like, when he fights Ivan Drago's son, it's like Apollo Creed's son, Ivan Drago's son.
Shouldn't have worked.
I'm like, but it's like, because if we're getting Cold War nostalgia, just from watching the movies coming back, the headlines are Cold War nostalgia. It's like Russia shows up, from, the end of the Cold War to pretty much, I'd say about 5-6 years ago, Russia didn't show up in at least American headlines very much. It wasn't something that was on people's minds all the time. But then suddenly when they started, when they annexed Crimea, and then when they were, showing, rattling the saber years ago about the Ukraine border, and then all the stuff about, Donald Trump having, collusion with them, and, being warm with Vladimir Putin. I'm like, yeah, I think we're going to see another rivalry in film again, just like Rocky IV with the ultimate cheese factory of, we can all get along, and, all that.
If I can change, you can change.
He actually uses that. He continues to, and we could all change, that inspirational moment is like, well, we're back again. And I saw that again with Cobra Kai, because the way that it was, Johnny is very one-dimensional in the original film. It's just like, he's a bully, he dresses like a scary skeleton at Halloween, and, terrorizes the interesting kid, who Daniel's like the ultimate 80s situation. Him and his mom, his single mom, arriving from New York, and they, he's total outsider. He doesn't know how to get along. He's really kind of nerdy kid and all that. And what a great story for that time period of like you said before, just like the underdog, standing up, and the song that goes along with the best around was originally for Rocky, but then they didn't use it for Rocky, but it fit perfectly in there. So it's like,
I read that a couple of years ago. I thought that was interesting.
And it's great because those two stories parallel each other so perfectly, and so what worked for Rocky works for Daniel. And so when I remember seeing the trailer for Cobra Kai, and I was intrigued because I'm like, oh yeah, we are pretty much, as a society, we tend to, like the villains in movies, the bad guys, we just toss them aside. Once they're defeated, they're done. We don't care anymore. But suddenly we see this guy, getting off, like pulling himself up off the floor, and he's, covered in filth, and he's like, And I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like, I couldn't help but I'm like, okay, well, here's a guy with blonde hair, kind of a bad tan. Uh, he's known for his bully type attitude, and yet he's going to help these kids.
Oh, interesting. I like that connection.
These underdogs, because that was kind of like the whole Trump campaign was, we're going to stick up for the overlooked population of America. And I was like, yeah, this is totally a 2016, 2017, 2018 product, even if they didn't realize they were doing it. That's why I picked up on it right away. Was like, yeah, this is now the story that we're going to be telling, is the villain is back, and now he's going to use his, kind of underhanded techniques to help the picked on kids, the ones he would have bullied back in, when he was younger. So for those of you listening to the show for the first time, you are I'm going to give you a heads up. What we do is we don't necessarily go through these questions in order, but I have a series of dissecting analysis questions that you would do for anything, like, say, in a museum, like an artifact in a museum, or an archaeologist pulls something out of the ground. They're trying to figure it out and what it can tell them about the time period that they're studying. And so we do the same thing here. And the first question that comes up, and I think we've already touched on it pretty well, is the material it's made from. And that's the Karate Kid world, right? Is there anything else that you think they're pulling from with Cobra Kai, especially after the series is taken off?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're already going around in circles with it. I mean, Rocky and Creed was huge, and I even listened to an interview with Ralph Macchio where he said it was because of Creed that Cobra Kai was even, it became a thing. This is before Netflix, on YouTube. Yeah. A big thing, I think, just in general, is nostalgia. I think we're seeing a lot of content that's nostalgia based. Some successful, some's not. But I think that everyone that has a half decent idea that remotely has attached to it, they want to jump on that right now because it's so popular. Just look through recent trailers, look through recent movies that are upcoming. Like 50% of them are nostalgia, and I think they were totally trying to take advantage of that. And just because we mentioned being the bully and all that, there is a long, I don't know, but a huge debate that started amongst fans where people were convinced that Daniel was the bully and he stole Johnny's girlfriend in the original one. And the creators of the show, which are they're huge Karate Kid fans, they played that into the plot. And there's actually scenes. There's one guy, and I'm not going to spoil things in the show, but there's one guy that yells out, "I heard you were the bully." So they're totally playing into that, where especially in the first scene, the pendulum switches and Daniel's kind of a dick and he's kind of the underdog. And that's the big draw of the first season. So I think there was a lot going on. That's the big thing for me. Yeah. If you're anything, what story are you trying to tell? What's the reason for why you're doing? Don't just do it because of nostalgia. Why do you want to tell the story? Oh, we want to tell John out of the story. We want to see what he's been up to. We want to flip the switch, make it less black and white, make it more gray. We're all human beings. And I think that's the biggest draw. It was made because of those specific reasons. The success of Rocky and Creed, bringing that back, nostalgia, and that long-lasting debate, which I think a lot of fans got a kick out of it because it's not wrong. Like Daniel is the hero of the original one for sure, but there is a little bit of a debate there because he pulls pranks on Johnny too. Absolutely.
It's funny that. Therefore, I think it's only appropriate that YouTube is where the show originally landed, because
I know the first two seasons.
YouTube's the factory for all those kinds of theories that fans come up with and put them out there. For a while it was like websites like crack.com and I think BuzzFeed would sometimes play with that kind of stuff too. But YouTube is really where, because reading a theory is not as good as somebody taking clips from a movie and putting it out there. And so it's like right along with the actual show itself. If I'm not mistaken, it was YouTube's first original program, right? Like they'd never
I think so. Yes,
it was up there, and I remember hearing, and I kind of had to agree with it too when Rian Johnson's stab at a Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi, came out. People put forward like the reason why it was so un-Star Warsy is that, and you had weird stuff like Luke Skywalker immediately throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder and all that kind of business. It was like a way to give a middle finger to the YouTube film theories people, because it's like when the original Star Wars movies came out, people were always talking to each other, on the playground or whatever. Like, I wonder who, is Darth Vader actually Luke Skywalker's dad? But we didn't have this organ that we could use called the internet to everybody proving how much that's a likely thing, and going back and like, if you freeze frame on the trailer you'll see the Knights of Ren and behind them are, I'm like, we've gotten like overload. So I think it's actually very perfect for Cobra Kai to show up and to use that plot line of Daniel being the bully, being the real instigator of the problem, because he is the disruptor. I mean, he's the one that comes from way out of town. Johnny and his friends have already pretty much are set in their ways. They have the social order in their, kind of sorted out. And then here comes this kid, with this, Brooklyn accent, and he's like, and starts, just messing with everybody. And they're like, hey,
a little like Rocky.
Yeah, we got to exactly, Rocky with that Philadelphia, so I guess they can't, you can't go wrong with that, that accent, right? The Atlantic coast, Eastern accent. So the material, straight up, it's coming from more than just one direction, not just the early 1980s. It's coming from a lot of different places. Because they tried doing Karate Kids. There's one with like Will Smith's son was in a Karate Kid movie. There's
Jackie Chan. They did. It was a remake. I forgot what year it was.
And then there was the one with what's her Hilary Swank, I think.
That was the next Karate Kid. That was the fourth one, I think, in the early 90s.
And those didn't take the same way that Cobra Kai has. And I think it's because they really didn't have that. There wasn't as much call for it as it was in the 80s, and then again in the late 2010s. So we talked about who made it, YouTube, and the creators of the show. I think it's very important to have, going back to just to add on to the last comment, it's important to have the original people involved in nostalgia pieces, because without it doesn't land the same way. I was just talking with my wife, actually, we did a podcast episode about A Christmas Story Christmas. And, even though they've done sequels of A Christmas Story, they haven't done as well, because unlike all those ones, this one has most of the original cast in it. So fans are like, this is the genuine article. This isn't just, somebody trying to cash in. So with Cobra Kai, you feel that way too, that it's like, this is the actual sequel, not the next Karate Kid.
Yeah, and with the success of the show, they've brought in more people back throughout each season. Like, it's at this point, by the end of season 5, it's ridiculous. All the characters that have come back, and the original actors and actresses in the roles.
That's really good. And that says a lot about the power of television these days, doesn't it? Like, because, they're not making a movie, they're making several seasons of a show. And that seems to be a lot more appealing to actors. I forget the name of the show. I was watching some show right around the same time that, we were all in quarantine and, sitting around watching TV all the time. I was watching a program, Big Little Lies or something like that. And it had star-studded cast. It was Reese Witherspoon. And,
Oscar winners,
Nicole Kidman. And the second season had
Meryl
Streep. And I'm like, this is a TV show. It's like, how do they get, because that's the way television's going. They've switched places with movies in the modern era. And I think that's just something about the makers, if we're including all the actors into their role and status in society, where would you place people like let's start with Ralph Macchio. I mean, where would you put him
in like his status?
In movie-dom, like when to me
he's
Ralph
a product
Macchio's,
of the 80s for sure. I mean, if you if you say Ralph Macchio, you'll either think The Outsiders or The Karate Kid.
Yeah.
Either or. I mean,
or My Cousin Vinny.
That's what I was going to say. My Cousin Vinny is a great movie. I don't know how well it did. I think it did okay. I don't think it was like a bomb or anything. But that was early 90s, if my memory serves me. I think like 92, 91, 92.
Yeah, around there,
and then after that, I mean, name me a Ralph Macchio movie. Like, I can't even really think of one.
He might not even be able to.
Yeah.
He's like,
and like he like the Karate Kid was huge. Like and again, did he get typecast? Maybe. Again, I don't know enough about his career, but that's about it. And that's what, if you kind of watch the seasons in succession, you can see in his performance in the first season, I don't think he quite knew what it was yet. I don't think any of them really did.
Right.
And then as the show goes on, you can tell everyone, specifically Ralph Macchio, is feeding totally into it. Like, my career is back. Like, this is great. Like, I'm going on interviews now. I'm back in pulp culture. I'm relevant. And the beauty of TV is you can dive deeper into all these characters. Like, you have the first 3 Karate Kid movies that he's in. You get way more character development in the 5 seasons of this show than you got in all 3 of those movies. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the sequels, 2 and 3. I mean, 3 is really schlocky. It's kind of the Rocky 5 of the Karate Kid. And I mean, even saying that, like, Terry Silver comes back from Karate Kid Part 3, and he was a total schlock fest, so over the top in Karate Kid Part 3, and they dive into his character. So it's so interesting what you can do, and I think actors like that because they have more to work with.
Right. And it's almost like because the same thing with the actor who plays Johnny. Like, I don't know anything else he's done.
He literally did nothing. He appeared a couple times as Johnny Lawrence. I think Ralph Macchio was on Dancing with the Stars, and Johnny Lawrence was a special guest host as Johnny Lawrence. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that.
I love when they play with stuff like that. And just throw in like fictional characters into real life settings. And, other than being constantly confusing me with the main bad guy in Revenge of the Nerds, like, it's basically, and it's same time period. So it makes sense. It's like you have the very, almost like, blonde hair, blue eye, starting quarterback appearance to somebody, versus the kid who doesn't fit that, cut. And then, they butt heads or kick each other, and, one comes out because he's, Ralph Macchio. But it's almost like the program itself, Cobra Kai, has become the outlet for these actors to, and they're almost like a reflection of their characters in the show, where they're rebuilding their lives, in this case their careers, by way of this show. And it was on YouTube for 2 seasons.
I don't know I don't have the specifics laid out, but I think it was picked up for the 3rd season, and that's when Netflix distributed, because that's when I watched it, when there were 3 seasons on Netflix. I didn't watch it on YouTube. And now it's just like, it's not quite Stranger Things, but like it's huge. Like, the 5th season came out less than a year after the 4th season, and I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a 6th season. I don't know. I don't think it's been renewed yet, but Netflix picked it up because it did. I don't know how the statistics are on YouTube, YouTube Red or Premium, whatever it's called, but apparently it was popular. Enough so that Netflix bought it, and it was a great decision on Netflix because it's been huge for them. It
wasn't a scenario where it was failing at YouTube and Netflix saved it. It was more like it was doing so good on YouTube that Netflix, like, we have to have it. It
could have been. Again, I don't know. Season 2 did end on a decent cliffhanger, so I'm not sure, honestly, either. I would have looked it up. I didn't know, but it could be either one of those stories, but I think it did do well on YouTube because I think I don't know if it had a broad appeal. I know Karate Kid fans were obsessed with it on YouTube.
And it seems like it probably outgrew YouTube to a certain extent, because YouTube's big thing when it first came out, and it's maintained this for the most part, is broadcast yourself. It's about user made, you make a video, you upload it, and anybody can do it. It's very democratic in that you don't really have to be a movie producer to get your stuff on YouTube. And then Netflix, on the other hand, not everybody can just show up on Netflix. So it's like their status, definitely by 2020, when they or so when they took up Cobra Kai, was to the point where, like you said, they're the Stranger Things, they're the Orange is the New Black channel, they're all these wonderful shows that they're putting out, and they are kind of like the top of the line when it comes to streaming shows. They changed that. They had House of Cards under their belt. They had a whole series of shows that they could point to and say, we make these things deep in pop culture. Like, it's going to be even bigger than what could be on YouTube, because I think YouTube, I don't know, it's just, I don't know if I always go there first when it comes to even renting or buying movies that I'll turn to, like, that's my last resort, and it's definitely not the first in my mind of like, oh, original programming from YouTube, because when I think of original programming from YouTube, it's some teenager somewhere that made a video with their friends and they put it on YouTube. It's not a Hollywood quality production. So I think it found a better home perhaps on Netflix.
I just quickly before we continue, I pulled it up just because I'm a stickler. I like to have proper facts. I'm just reading here. The third season was produced for YouTube and was initially set for a 2020 release, but in May 2020 the series left YouTube and moved to another streaming platform ahead of the third season premiere. As YouTube was not interested in renewing the series for a fourth season, the producers wanted to find a streaming venue that would leave that option open. The show moved to Netflix in June, taking the third season with them. And then the rest is history.
Yeah, it must just have everything to do with YouTube just not having the capacity to operate a full show like that, because it was a big deal just a few, for the better part of most of the year when the Weird Al Yankovic movie was being made by Roku, because they had never done anything like that. They would always just kind of been the carrier, kind of like YouTube, of all these other channels, and then they're like, we're gonna promote this thing like crazy because we've never made a movie before, and we have Harry Potter.
Have a Roku TV, and it was advertised every time we turned the TV on.
Well, and Roku exists because of Netflix. Like, that was the only reason that they came about, was because of that. And so they really pushed that thing hard. Did you see the Weird Al biopic?
I did, and outside of Daniel Radcliffe lip singing in it, it's Weird Al's voice, which did not work. Other than that, I thought the movie was great. It was so much fun. Once you realize it is 100% a parody, obviously, exactly. I just love how ridiculous it gets.
I probably took a little bit longer than most people. I was like, when the dad started beating up the accordion salesman, I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, that probably didn't happen. Then I'm like, oh, because it reminded me a lot of UHF, his movie from the 80s. After that, I'm like, oh, I get it. He's making another. Anyway, back to speaking of another 80s, icon that's he's not been reborn. He just, hasn't gone away. I think we did a pretty good job already of discussing why did they make it. But because you mentioned Creed and the success of that, I don't know if we can really call it a franchise. It was just a couple movies, but the revival of the Rocky story through the eyes of another character, and the son of another character from the Rocky series, it must have given somebody within that filmmaking apparatus, like, okay, we're getting the Rocky story again, but just through different eyes. Maybe we could do that with Karate Kid, because they are two parallel stories. Do you think there's anything else that maybe pushed the Cobra Kai getting greenlit?
So the main two things that I wrote down that I've already mentioned is Creed and nostalgia.
Yeah,
for sure. And then obviously on top of that, like the whole debate of the bullying as well. I don't think it was much more beyond that. I mean, because no one else involved really was relevant. So there was, I think if you want to use that as an answer, they probably just wanted to do something. And like, you know what, like let's take advantage of this. And I mean, and like Cobra Kai follows kind of Creed 2 more than Creed, because Creed 2 is literally a direct, like, it's not a direct sequel to Rocky 4, but it's taking an 80s cheese fest in Rocky 4. I love Rocky 4. It's a lot of fun.
But it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, but it fleshes out the characters. Like, literally, Johnny is Drago, and we get to know more about him, and Rocky is Daniel, I guess, kind of. But Cobra Kai did exactly what Creed 2 did. Creed as well, kind of, but Creed 2 mainly. It made what came before even better. When you go back and watch Rocky 4 now, with the knowledge of what comes in Creed 2, it's like, oh, okay, I understand a little bit more of what Drago was going through and his culture in Russia and how he's treated like a machine. Oh, okay, I get it. I get it. This is better. It's the same thing as Cobra Kai, maybe even more so, especially with Terry Silver and I'm drawing a blank on John Kreese. The trainer of Johnny,
the head guy.
Yeah, they flesh out everyone even more, and then we're not even talking about the new characters. And the new characters are pretty good. The main few, I mean, there's a few that are whatever. I mean, they don't have a lot of screen time, but the main few, and the big thing they do is Johnny takes someone under his wing. So Johnny kind of becomes Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
And they're flipping that up on its head, where it's like now the villain is the Miyagi of this kid. And this kid's got a rough background because he just moved to town with his mom. So there are all these parallels. Like it's so well done at how they craft everything. Daniel's not even a huge part of the first season till the end. So it's Johnny's story at the most, and you get his backstory with his stepdad, I believe, and his mom and their relationship. And John Kreese was total like a surrogate father figure to him. Like, it's so good, and it makes what comes before it even better. Specifically, the first Karate Kid, not really Karate Kid Part 2. I mean, they do some callbacks to Karate Kid Part 2 that are good, but the series makes the movies better. Creed 2 and Creed make the Rocky franchise even better, specifically Rocky 4. Yeah.
So that's such a great thing that movie makers and TV makers can do now is, and I'm so glad you brought that up, of like instead of trying to remake the movie or go back like George Lucas did and put in a bunch of CGI stuff where it didn't belong. Yeah. It's like repairing it from like, okay, well, we can do what we can now, and then that will improve the story. Because you're right, when you go into the Cobra Kai dojo in the original movie, you're not even thinking that any of these guys have an actual life behind,
not even mentioned.
They're just like robots almost, like they're these, and they zoom in on the pictures of the Green Beret, Vietnam vet guy that, learned all this stuff, and, is a great martial artist on his own right. And you get this like, and Lamar Luttrell from Revenge of the Nerds and Cobra Kai originally, he's one of those guys, but they're just like these almost like pawns like in the original movie. So then now they can go back and say, okay, the reason why Johnny was a jerk was because, like a lot of kids in that time period, he was dealing with blended family issues, that he, was looking for a male role model, and this was the best he could do, is this guy, and, he didn't know much better given his circumstances. And so, that's a great opportunity that movie and TV makers have now, is to go back and, instead of just like so many of these callback movies and TV shows and reboots and stuff, where it's just like eye candy for fans, fan service, where it's just like, oh yeah, do you remember this from when we did that? Isn't this funny that we're bringing it up again?
Chewie getting the medal at the end of Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, finally, that guy, he could have used that back then, and now his self-esteem's better. Instead of just doing that kind of stuff, it's actually going into the details and really working the story into something that probably back in the 80s, they never thought Karate Kid would become this big, again. Never.
The Karate Kid movies have a strong relationship with the Rocky series of films, starting most notably with a shared director. The Rocky franchise made its first 21st century entry with the 2006 movie Rocky Balboa, a movie written and directed by Sylvester Stallone, and was received quite well by audiences and critics. A spin-off movie, Creed, arrived in 2015 with a sequel produced in 2018. The Karate Kid was remade rather sloppily in 2010, making Cobra Kai the first appearance of the original 1980s storyline since the turn of the century. And because of the success of Rocky's return to the pop culture ring, Daniel-san was welcomed back as well. But where Creed retains its protagonist lineage, Cobra Kai shakes things up. Even though Daniel LaRusso is still very much a main character, his original nemesis, Johnny Lawrence, the awful bully who torments Daniel for most of the original movie, is the focal point of Cobra Kai. This is consistent with the long list of anti-hero protagonists that have graced the small screen for the better part of the last 20 years. But it's unique to see the bona fide bad guy redeemed the way this show does it. And if the culture of the time period in which the show first came out is any indicator, Americans were looking for a similar kind of shakeup, particularly in the world of politics. How well do bully tactics honed in the 1980s transfer to the 21st century sensibilities? Are there qualities about the simple tough guy mindset that not only hold up decades later, but might be beneficial to young people trying to cope and navigate through a new and age-old problems all at one time? These questions, this debate, is front and center throughout the Cobra Kai series, and is part of the secret to its success as it continues, at the time of this podcast recording, to be made. Head on over to my Substack, epspodcast.substack.com, to hear the second part of this conversation I had with Adam, as well as the show notes for the program. You can also find it by becoming a patron at patreon.com/EPSpodcast. Please join me next time in the EPS podcast, where everything, including Cobra Kai, is a primary source.